Today, we'll be having basically a sharing or discussion on best practices on how to migrate to online learning. Uh, it's no surprise that in the world today, COVID-19 has hit all countries quite severely. Businesses and stopped, and most especially schools and institutions. Students cannot come to campus. Teachers cannot actually teach. And now it's a big challenge for us in the education sector as to how to uh, bring this into, how to teach and continue teaching in this new environment. So we have a guest from AcadAsia to uh, actually help us learn more about how the best practices are for this. And then later on, we also have a case study from Philippines on how we have probably adopted, and we actually have a partner school with us that was able to get on their classes online within 1 week. All right, so as soon as that. And hopefully with those sharings and insights, you can learn something to apply to your own schools and educational institutions today. So what I've done right now, at least just to moderate the information in the chat, is I've disabled the chat for now. And what we can do is, if you have any questions or comments, please use the Q&A button on the Zoom menu at the bottom. So you will see a Q&A button there. So please direct your questions there. And because we have so many attendees today, we'll do our best to tackle them by themes. We'll group them together. And hopefully by towards the end of this webinar, we can go through some of those questions with you and answer them for you. Okay, so again, we'll have some sharings this morning. So first off, to start, we'd like to hear, of course, a welcome message from the founder and CEO of AcadAsia, live from Singapore. I'd like to introduce Mr. Nilesh Bhatia. Nilesh, please take it away.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you very much. And a very, very good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. To everybody, we really, really appreciate your time to come here today and join us and learn, hopefully, on how we can help you to migrate your classes online in the most easiest and the quickest manner possible. AcadAsia is based in Singapore. We have offices and country managers in Singapore, India, Vietnam, Philippines, and of course, Indonesia as well. At the end of this webinar, should you have any further questions, please do feel free to contact any one of our offices in these countries, or you can contact us directly here in Singapore, and we will channel your inquiry to the respective country office. Rest assured, we are here to help and support all educators across Asia. And it is our hope that all of you are able to provide a quality education to your students at any given point, from any time, at any time, from anywhere. And that's been our mission as well. And we thank you once again for joining us here today. Thank you, Roy.
Thank you, Neil, for that message. So now I'd like to introduce our first speaker for this morning, and that will be the bulk of our topic for today, because he actually has a wealth of experience in online education and e-learning, more than 20 years. In fact, his team, when they actually won an award in 2017, I think the best e-learning team, I think in Singapore. He has a wealth of experience and is with one of the leading polytechnics. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Head of Academics, Mr. Mark Nivan Singh. Mark, take it away.
Hi, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. It's a good, bright, sunny, cloudy day in Singapore. Welcome to the webinar. I'll just switch to the PowerPoint slides and then we will continue from there. So just give me a second as I bring up the slides. Okay. Hello, everyone again. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Mark, and I'm very pleased to be with everyone here today. Today, we will be talking about some of the things we need to think about when trying to shift to online learning, and more importantly, the design considerations that make online learning effective as we grapple with the COVID-19 situation around the world. I will be sharing my experience with our colleagues in Singapore, and I do hope that at the end, when we do a Q&A, you can share some of your thoughts as well. So a little bit about me. I've been an educator all my life. I have taught in secondary schools in Singapore and was also heading a pedagogical team that focused on effective teaching and learning in an institute of higher learning. I have a master's degree in education, and as Roy mentioned earlier, in 2017, my team won the Blackboard Catalyst Award for Best E-Learning Professional Development Site. Now, in my free time, I look for innovative ways to help lecturers make learning engaging and, more importantly, meaningful for students. So this is what I thought we should cover for today. We have quite a number of things, but I hope you understand that because of limited time, we won't go into too much detail, but I hope to give you a good overview of things to look out for, and then we can continue the conversation either offline or through the Q&A. You will first look at things that you need to consider even before we talk about moving learning online. Then I think it will be wise to talk a little bit about students and learning, and that's where I'll share with you my thoughts on how much content we should be pushing to students, and more importantly, how should the learning be structured for students. I will then share a little bit about how you can check that students are really learning now that they have shifted online. And then I also want to address a little bit about whether it is better to do synchronous or asynchronous learning. We will then wrap up the session by talking about what you can do with your existing content. And then I will take some questions that you may have for me and the team. Then I also like to leave some time for Q&A because I think it's also wise that we can share experiences from around the world. So if you are ready, let's talk about some of the things to consider now that we think we need to move learning online to keep the learning happening. Now, in order for online learning experience to be effective and meaningful, I sincerely believe that there are two key ingredients that must be present and considered even before we can claim to have had successful teaching and learning experience. These two ingredients are: one, good solid protocols, and two, effective learning design. Now, for this first part of my sharing, we will focus on good solid protocols. So what exactly do I mean when I say good solid protocols? I would like to share with you a story that happened to me early in my career as a teacher. Truth be told, COVID-19 is not my first crisis as a teacher. I lived through SARS in 2003 and I lived through H1N1. Both of these times, I learned very valuable lessons about good protocols. For example, I spent many hours designing my online learning classes for my students, but it was mostly all in vain because the organizations that I was working for then didn't have a comprehensive value chain plan, and the technology that we had back then was not able to handle my very grand plans. So we ended up resorting to printing worksheets and posting them to students. This obviously created a few problems. One, it was a nightmare to print and stick stamps and stuff these worksheets into envelopes to send out. Two, to make matters worse, some students never received it at all. And three, it is obviously bad for the environment. Anyway, from my experience, it is therefore, I think, imperative, if you are a school leader, to have a comprehensive plan and stock take of the current capabilities and budget that you have. And more importantly, make clear to all stakeholders what is the stand towards online learning. When I say this, I'm reminded by Henry Ford's famous line, fail to plan, plan to fail. The second thing that I think you need to think about is to create a set of guidelines or cheat sheet available for your teachers or lecturers or educators so that you know the boundaries and can quickly get to work. If you Google after I finish my sharing, why online learning fails, it basically boils down to poor learning design and inappropriate use of technology. So I think it is important that school leaders spend some time and effort to provide guidelines based on the plan the school has. Another important tip is to think about the way that you are going to monitor the students' workload. From our experience in Singapore, year after year, when we conduct learning online, the number one complaint all students have is they felt that the workload is much more what they had in a face-to-face class than online. With that comes the importance of clear communication to students. Without clear communication on how to learn and what to learn, I'm pretty sure your students will lose interest very quickly. Trust me, it has happened to me before. Students couldn't even find the start learning button and the learning just went to bits even before it started. So now, while we have spoken a lot about students, I think your instructors, lecturers, teachers themselves are also critical stakeholders in the whole equation. What kind of support are we providing them? Where do they go for help if they need it? How are you helping them level up so that they can provide excellent learning experience for students? So lastly, I also think that it is important that management thinks about how you are going to obtain student feedback on the learning experience. Don't discount this. This is important as it will help management make better and more informed decisions in the future. I'm particularly reminded by this quote by Albert Einstein. Insanity is doing the same things over and over again and expecting the different result. So now that we have looked at good, solid protocols, let's look at the other components. My pet topic, something that I hold very dear to my heart. Effective learning design. And I want to start by looking at students and learning. If there is one thing that you should take away from my sharing with you today, is this. Just because you are merely shifting the mode of learning from traditional classroom to an online environment does not mean and guarantee that learning will automatically happen. You cannot realistically expect students to learn on their own online. Let us be real. The teacher, instructor, lecturer is absolutely critical and is the catalyst here. The same principles of good, effective pedagogical principles apply just as importantly online, just as they do in a normal face-to-face class. In fact, as I was preparing for this webinar, the past few days, all I read about is how online learning is a failure and students are not learning at all. Maybe it's a good time now to really revisit some of these key principles of learning. I'm sure some of them could be quite familiar to many of you. I would think that it would be wise to just go through this very quickly so that we understand the base that we are operating from. Now, one of the key principles of learning must include having motivational strategies that are incorporated into the design of learning. Now, if you take a step back and think about this, many e-learning designs are simply just mounds and mountains of text that's just put online in the hope that students can navigate the complexity of all this learning and somehow learning will happen. That to me is a little bit irresponsible in my opinion, because students, whether they are in the face-to-face classroom or learning online, need motivational strategies. The other thing that I think we need to be quite clear about, and we need to think about very clearly, is your learning goals, objectives, and proficiency expectations are clearly made visible to learners. This means that learners know exactly what they are getting themselves into, and they themselves should be able to regulate their learning so they know what is expected of them. Do not again underestimate the importance of providing these objectives and outcomes clearly right at the beginning for students. The other thing that I think is really not so done in a consistent manner is how are we leveraging on students' prior knowledge so that we can activate it and connect it to new learning. Another interesting thought would be is really making use of technology in an online environment, which is principle number 4, to enhance learning through multiple methods and presentation modes. Now, with the technology available and the use of edutech tools such as videos, podcasts, quizzes, and even discussion boards really help to engage the whole range of senses. Now, number 5, this is particularly important to me. I focus on this a lot. To me, this transcends every important rule in or principle of learning, and that is content is organized around key concepts and principles that are fundamental to understanding the structure of the subject. So here's a challenge for you. Think about this for a second. Many of you who are here online now are content matter experts in your subject. If I was to issue you a challenge, can you distill the principles and concepts of your subject area into 4 major concepts? Can you do it? Think about this for a second. By doing so, it really just emphasizes or highlights what is key learning for your students without necessarily creating a lot of fluff that comes along with it. And we will discuss this in greater detail as we move along. So principle number 6 is looking at good thinking promotes the building of understanding. If we just pile mounds and mounds of text online and we do not help students to grapple or interact with the content, you don't really build understanding. And that means learning is basically not happening. Number 7, learning design utilizes the working of memory systems. We all know that students forget easily. We always tend to find ourselves repeating content over and over again. And there's a reason for this. It's because our students really have poor memory systems. So the learning online gives us the opportunity to really ensure that we make use of technology to help our students learn and memorize things more effectively. And that brings us to principle number 8, which is the development of expertise requires deliberate practice. Now, this is one of the eternal truths in learning that I think we all acknowledge. To be really good at something, you need to practice. In fact, Malcolm Gladwell wrote, you need 10,000 hours of deliberate practice to be an expert in something. So So that's the same concept that I think we need to apply even in an online environment, where we really need to find ways to give students opportunities to practice and interact with the content that we want them to learn. Now, number 9 to me is also one of the more important things that maybe we do not think about seriously when we do online learning. And that is, assessment practices are integrated into the learning design to provide quality feedback. If you forget everything I've talked about so far, the research is very clear. You need to provide quality feedback for your students when they are learning online. In fact, in his groundbreaking book, Visible Learning, John Hattie says the number one method that helps with improving learning is quality feedback by the instructor, lecturer, teacher. So think about this. How can we provide quality feedback to every one of our students who is learning online? And number 10, a psychological climate is created with success, which is success-oriented and fun. And I think this is where online learning really has an opportunity or an affordance to really offer an environment which can be success-oriented and fun. So the main point I'm trying to make here is that these principles are eternal, regardless of the mode of learning, and that designers of e-learning must pay attention to these principles if they want to do successful learning. Roy, maybe it's now a good time for us to do the poll. Roy?
Yes, we can try to put up the poll now.
Yeah, can we run the poll now? So the poll questions that's coming up based on the principles that we just talked about. Look at the question and I would love to hear your thoughts.
So now there should be a poll appearing on the screen of everybody. We'll just give a few minutes to allow everybody, maybe 30 seconds to 1 minute, to allow everybody to answer the poll, and then Mark can continue from there. Again, we'd like to thank everybody who's joining us from all over the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you, wherever you are. And amidst this COVID-19 crisis that we are all going through, we at ACAD Asia are here to help support you as you try to understand and migrate to online learning and to get your schools and institutions online and to continue the education that our young people need desperately, especially now in these times where there's a lot of uncertainty and we have to adjust and adapt as human beings so that we can actually continue. We have every confidence that as the entire world tries to keep the virus in check, that we will see this through. And education is one of the areas where we need to be able to provide so that people will be better informed and learn actually how to study online. So some of the questions are trickling in slowly. So although we only have about half of the participants answering the poll, I can actually end the poll now. And then Mark, maybe you can look at the result. I guess this is not a surprise to you. So we're going to share the results with everybody now.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so actually the results, thank you for that. I thank you for participating in the poll. Yes, I think even in our previous session, where we talked to some other educators around the world, they basically agree that these principles apply regardless of the context. I think the challenge now would be to include these principles in an online environment. Now, due to the shortage of time, and because I'm only just sharing core ideas, we won't be going into details, but if you're interested to know more how we can integrate these principles for effective learning, please speak to any of the ACAD Asia staff who can help upskill your lecturers. So let's move on. Now that we have reminded ourselves about principles of learning, I think I want to address this question that many instructors or lecturers always like to ask me. So Mark, let's talk about how much content is enough, because I have lots of content. I think what we need to think about is there is no easy answer to this question. It really depends on the profile of your students. But I do know one thing that is true, and I've mentioned this earlier. Our students in Singapore especially are notoriously poor at remembering things. And again, just because we shove them online does not mean that they learn. So more is not always better. The other thing that we need to think about is you really need to think about the nature of your subject. How is it best presented? What is the essence of your subject, and what are the concepts that make up the subject? I hope you are still thinking about my challenge that I issued to you about 5 minutes ago, which is, can you distill the essence of your content into 4 main concepts? So what I think we need to think about then is, after we have done that, how are we going to present the content? Is it best through a simple explainer video? Do they need to see it step by step? Would an animation be better? Or is audio good enough? I think we also need to think about helping them remember. And more importantly, again, it is not about piling on content after content, because not everyone will go through everything. More importantly, I also think it is also about introducing formative assessments to help students to consistently check for their learning and understanding, and also to provide feedback for the lecturer and instructor on what is working and what is not, so that the instructor can then make changes on the fly. So this leads us to one of the big questions. How then should I structure my learning for the students? I think what I'm showing you now is familiar to many of us. It is Garnier's 9 events of instruction, and it is, in my opinion, an evergreen model. I have specifically chosen it because it dovetails nicely with the principles of learning. For example, look at the second event of instruction. It says to inform learners of the objectives. And if you remember principle 2 in the previous slides, learning goals, objectives, and performance expectations are clearly visible to learners. You can see why this model provides an easy-to-use guide on how instructors should structure our learning. First, gain the student's attention. This can be in the form of a video or even a controversial statement. Then make clear the expectations and what is it that students will be learning from you by attending this online class. Then structure learning by activating prior knowledge with things that students are familiar with, so that they can easily connect and learn new concepts. You can then present the content, and what is important in my opinion about this model, again, let me emphasize, is the opportunity for the lecturer to provide guidance and feedback. This goes back to what I said earlier. You cannot just dump some content online and expect your students to learn it. There must be feedback and consistent guidance. Which brings me to the next important point. So how do I check if my students are really learning? Now, I think when it comes to checking for understanding, we can divide it into 2 components: knowledge items and skill-based items. In my humble opinion, it is easier to do an assessment of knowledge items online. And these can take the form of MCQs, fill in the blanks, matching items, and even crossword puzzles. For skills-based items, for lecturers such as people who teach practical skills, performance-based assessments are better methods to make informed judgments of student skills. However, in light of the fact that it would be difficult for students to come together in this present environment to do a skills-based assessment, you as an instructor can mitigate this by getting them to work on case studies, posing problem-based questions, or even getting them to do video submissions of them practicing the skill or doing a performance. I just want to emphasize this clearly. While this is not perfect, it will go in some way in checking for student learning and ensure that you are not wasting your time putting online learning. The best part is, if you think about it, these items do not need to happen online synchronously. It can be done offline and submitted when students return to school after the situation has stabilized. So another question that gets asked a lot is, so if we are talking about moving learning online, should it be synchronous or asynchronous? Before I share with you the pros and cons of each, I think it might be useful for me to share my own personal thoughts. Personally, when people ask me, so Mark, when you do your e-learning design, what do you go for? Do you go with synchronous or asynchronous? Personally, I feel that going asynchronous, I beg your pardon, is best. Why? Asynchronous, in my opinion, allows me more time to plan more effectively, decide on how best to deliver the concepts and content, and also allow me to choose a wide variety of tools to check for my student understanding. The best part, students can access it anywhere, anytime, and I can support my students' learning anytime without any sense of time pressure. Now, the one time I tried to do synchronous learning, the technology didn't work. There was an issue with the microphone, and managing students in an online environment was far more challenging than, of course, doing it face-to-face. Now, you may, of course, disagree with me. That's just my personal opinion. And there are advantages in doing synchronous teaching. Some of them include real-time discussion. Everybody is in the same room. You can have face-to-face discussion. It brings the whole social element together when we do things like real-time collaboration. There's also opportunity for the instructor or lecturer to provide immediate feedback, which I have emphasized earlier, a critical component in students' learning. It can be relatively cost-effective in getting lots of people online at the same point and then conducting a lesson. And the facilitator can quickly gauge the understanding of concepts and making changes to the teaching and learning immediately on the spot to ensure that he or she can close the knowledge gaps. And some students do find this motivating so that they can complete the assignments of the course because they feel that the lecturer is always available. As with asynchronous, I would just like to emphasize that some of the advantages include anytime, anywhere learning. Many of my students have told me they do not like to learn early in the morning. They like to spend the night when bandwidth is better to do their learning. They like to access materials when it is convenient, it is their time, and not be bounded by, I need to be online at this particular moment in time. Asynchronous also provides them an opportunity to research some answers, to really reflect on their learning, and more importantly, to engage in deep learning. And this allows them to express their thoughts without any kind of interruption. Now, there are also disadvantages for each. And I think for synchronous, this is one of the disadvantages, and that would be is you need to coordinate it in such a way that everybody needs to be at the same time and same place. It may require some technical knowledge, although I think with the advances in technology, this is now being reduced, and it does require some form of technical infrastructure. What happens if we are not all blessed or privileged enough to have good, solid infrastructure? Then synchronous learning may actually be a disadvantage. The cost is only as good as the facilitator. As with face-to-face teaching, it all boils down to how good is the design and how good is the lecturer or instructor. And learners, unfortunately, do not get to learn at their own pace. There is very little opportunity for deliberate practice. They cannot go back and interact with the information at their own pace and own time. But that doesn't mean that asynchronous does not have its disadvantages as well. Some of this may include, and this is one of a real concern, is learners may feel a lack of connection because they are interacting with the information at their own time. They may not necessarily be online together with their classmates, and this might be quite lonely, so to speak. So therefore, self-paced learning does require a level of motivation to complete the course. And more importantly, sometimes there is delayed feedback. Students may not necessarily get an answer immediately, especially if one of my students who posts a question or ask for help at 3 a.m. in the morning. I'm pretty sure he or she will not be able to get an answer within the next 10 minutes. And again, there's no immediate access to facilitator if they have any questions or if there's a technical issue that they are facing, they are unable to solve it. So we will now look at the next part of the webinar, which I would like to just spend a little bit more time here. So what can I do with existing content? It is a question that I get asked a lot by my colleagues and new lecturers who, when they join the institute, always ask, but Mark, I have a lot of content already. What can I do with my existing content? Do I really need to create new content? The good news is, no, you do not. So I've tried to create a simple schematic to help lecturers figure out how they can develop this quite quickly and deploy it within the next 2 to 3 days should the need arise. I think right at the very beginning, we need to understand is what is it that you want your students to learn? So it goes back to the principles of outcome-based education. Are you able to clearly state what are the outcomes that you would expect your students to be able to achieve by learning this course online? You will then need to organize the learning into concepts. Yes, it's going back to the challenge I issued earlier again. You really need to think about organizing your learning into key learning concepts. Then decide if the 9 events is the way to go. Now, there are many other models, but for the sake of today's session, I'm just providing one. You can look for more or maybe drop me an email. I'll be more than happy to share with you other models. But you need to decide if the 9 events is the way to go. And when you do decide that it is the way to go, you really need to take out pen and paper. Yes, really take out pen and paper. Start to plan and organize the learning from your students' point of view. Think about this from their point of view, and you will be able to see what is actually going to work and what it is not going to work. The next thing that you should then think about is, can you reuse your content? You will be surprised, and I'm pretty sure that many of the content that you have is reusable. I would also like to suggest that maybe you should curate and not create new items for your online learning. You can curate with the many professional learning communities that you're already part of. You can even go to YouTube. You can even look for instructional videos. And I think many of you are already familiar with the idea of TeacherTube, which has many, many instructional videos that you can take and use for your students' learning. The next thing then you should think about is really what kind of assessment do I need to provide for my students to check for their learning. And I would like to emphasize is this is not what I would call a high stakes sort of an exam. This is just little simple activities that you would want to incorporate to ensure that my students are really benefiting from learning online and that they are picking up information that I'm putting up online. You will then need to develop the material, and again, I would like to emphasize, look for opportunities to curate rather than develop from scratch. Then, more importantly, sit down and create the instructions for students on how they can navigate the learning and how they should be interacting with the content. I cannot emphasize this enough. Again, it goes back to what I mentioned earlier. Don't provide clear instructions, and be sure many of your students already give up on the learning before they even start. The other thing that I think we should think about is you should monitor the learning and the quality of interactions that is going on in your course. Why? Because this provides you the opportunity to provide feedback and also to understand what students really are getting from your lessons, and are they really learning, or are they struggling with certain ideas and concepts. Now, it shouldn't stop there. The final step that you should do is to really ask for feedback from your learners. What was the experience like for them? And this is important because as I've done this with my own students, I realized that they are telling me things from a learner's perspective that myself as an instructor may not have considered. And that is why I've now created the one about create the instructions for students, because many of them say while the design is good, they actually have no idea of how to navigate the learning, what should they do first, what should they do next, and so forth. So think about this. Ask for feedback from learners. You may not like some of the feedback that they give, but if you start early, it gives you the opportunity to ensure that we create good and effective learning for our students. So I thought I'll just do a quick summary. We are about to come to an end with my sharing about do's and don'ts. Number one, use what you already have, but don't just put what you already have online and expect students to know. You need to provide a guide and plan for effective learning. You cannot expect students to be self-directed or expect them to learn on their own. It is highly unlikely to happen. You do need to check for student understanding often. Don't assume students are learning without checking. Curate the many resources that the internet and the web has. Tap professional development communities. Don't try and redevelop every material. It is going to be a mammoth and almost impossible task. Do allow students to interact and contribute towards the learning. Don't just let your students consume, make them contributors. And this is where I feel it is important as a motivating factor when students now feel they are part of the learning and not just simple consumers. So that's a challenge for you as well. How then do you let your students become contributors towards their own learning? Do make use of the free tools made available. Personally, I never ever buy tools for e-learning. If the organization doesn't buy them in an enterprise license, I do not spend money buying them, because to me, there are many free tools available that you can make use of already. So do not buy expensive tools that you will only use once. Okay? Another do is apply the KISS principle, keep it simple, simply, and more is not always better. Another do, organize the learning in a clean and efficient manner. Do not overly crowd things with extra graphics. It really doesn't help with the learning. So don't assume your students will be able to navigate your learning intuitively just because they are considered digitals, born in the digital age, doesn't mean that they are able to navigate the learning easily. That was to my cost and horror when I realized that actually students needed step-by-step instructions of how to navigate the learning. You should, as good practice also, provide extra learning materials for students that can help reinforce their learning, and also for students who want more of this extra learning. And you shouldn't teach more than necessary, especially in an online learning. So I'd just like to quickly share with you some of the tools that I have found useful, and they are free, that I've used quite a lot even when I'm doing my e-learning. One is a Screencast-O-Matic, where you can easily record your voice for PowerPoint and create quick explainer videos. Padlet, where you can use it to allow students to post their views to check for student understanding. I've also used Powtoons, where you can create comic strips to teach concepts. And now I have also extended use of Powtoons to my students, where I get them to create comic strips to make sure that I know they understand the content that I'm trying to teach them. You can also use websites like Anchor.fm, where you can create podcasts, short, sweet podcasts to students and distribute it to them so that they can learn on the go. And also use websites like Canva, where you can create powerful infographics and free ebooks that you can distribute to your students. And of course, with the tool that we are using now, Zoom, and live discussions with your students online. I personally like to use Zoom to target my feedback to my students when I need to do more small group-based type of instruction, or to give personalized feedback to students. Or of course, you can use Freeju. Now, Freeju is a learning management platform, and we are currently offering such trainer upskilling program where we can dive deeper into the principles that we've been talking about for the last 20-30 minutes, and help lecturers really develop engaging online learning experiences. You can also enroll an unlimited number of students and instructors or teachers online for free lifetime access of materials and information. You get to upload your own curriculum again for free and integrate with Teams or Slack for live communication and making use of other free educational technology tools that you can do together with you. And more importantly, to keep up with the digital age, the issuance of certifications through a blockchain certification system, and also allowing for customization of local languages. So if you're interested, you can contact the people on the list here. I have really come to an end of my presentation. I thank you for spending some time with me, and I would really love to hear some of your thoughts about how you are doing e-learning or learning online. And you can post some of the questions in the Q&A, and I'll be glad to answer them. Thank you very much.